I want to start today with a question. How many times since October 7th, 2023, have you stopped before leaving the house to ask yourself whether you should be wearing your Star of David necklace or a kippah out on the street? What we wear has meaning. Last fall, I had the privilege of taking a class called Dress and the Body in the Hebrew Bible and Beyond with Rabbi Dr. Amy Kalmanovsky. In that class, we studied the way clothing and the human body are portrayed in the Tanakh, but in doing so, we also analyzed our own dress-related choices. One of the capstones of the class was the dress assessment, where we each tracked everything we wore for 2 weeks. We kept logs of our clothing and our accessories, as well as our toiletries and beauty products. We tracked how much each of those items cost, which for me was a very rude awakening, and we analyzed how each item made us feel. Ultimately, the question we examined, both for ourselves and for the biblical characters about whom we were reading, was not what we wore, but why we wore it. In this week's Parsha, Tetzaveh, we learn about the priestly garments that will be worn by Aaron and his sons as they lead the Jewish people. And their garments, too, have layers upon layers of personal and public meaning. What can we learn from the design and the purpose of these priestly garments? And how can those values guide us through the decisions we make today about how we present ourselves to the world? As outlined in Parshat Tetzaveh, the priestly uniform includes a breastplate, an ephod, which is like a vest or an apron, a robe, a fringed tunic, a headdress, and a sash. Each of these garments is to be adorned with lush colors, precious metals, and beautiful sparkling gemstones. The fabrics are to be woven in gold, blue, purple, and crimson. The frames of the breastplate and all the connective rings between the garments are to be sculpted out of pure gold. Very fancy. And of course, the priests are to have 12 precious stones on their breastplates alongside the Urim and Tumim, and these 12 stones represent each of the 12 tribes of Israel. The Zohar, which comments on spiritual and mystical aspects of Jewish text and tradition, reminds us that even something as seemingly superficial as clothing is deeply symbolic. It teaches that the garments of the Kohanim are symbolic of the layers of meaning within the Sefer Torah, within the Torah itself. As my friend and colleague Rabbi Jenna Shaw explains it, the Zohar's teaching emphasizes that the garments, the external stories, are not the essence of the Torah itself, but rather a means to connect us with the deeper soul of the Torah. The commandments, the body, are the actions we are called to perform, but the true soul of the Torah lies beneath, accessible only to those who look beyond the surface. We are told in this week's Parsha that the priestly garments serve 2 purposes: kavod and tiferet. Kavod meaning respect or dignity, and tiferet meaning beauty or glory. There is some disagreement between commentators about what exactly this kavod and this tiferet refer to. On the one hand, Nachmanides teaches that the priestly garb should inspire kavod, should inspire respect from the Israelites, from the people, toward the priests, and whose tiferet should be resplendent to all Israelites who see it. On the other hand, Sforno tells us not that the kavod is due from the people to the priests, but rather that the garments themselves should render kavod to God as the priests carry out their temple service and inspire tiferet in the eyes of the Israelites. Ibn Ezra adds to the conversation that no other Israelites should wear similar garments to the priests as they befit only the priestly station. Though these commentators don't agree on who the kavod and who the tiferet are for, there's someone they leave out. They all share an implicit understanding, one we can glean through their omission, of who the priestly garments are not for. They are not for the priests themselves. They are tools for priestly relationships, physical manifestations of the priest's relationship, either with Bnei Yisrael or with God. There is, of course, any time we're getting dressed, a third component in addition to honor and beauty: practicality. Part of the reason, for example, that Aaron's garment has so many bells and whistles, and I do mean bells and whistles very literally, is so that he will make noise as he approaches the Mishkan, and God will make sure to withdraw his physical presence from within, because anyone who sees God's physical presence will die. It's a protective measure for Aaron. There are also perhaps somewhat lower stakes aspects to practicality within these garments. For example, God's exhortation to Moses that the priests must cover at least a certain amount of their legs. And I don't buy that this was just about modesty. Remember, priestly service in the Mishkan and the temple was not at all similar to what rabbis do today. Their jobs were very active and at times messy, requiring animal sacrifices and other forms of offerings multiple times a day, every day. How can you maintain the beauty of a garment while handling things like animal blood? Jews in America and around the world are no strangers to decision-making that attempts to balance kavod and tiferet with practicality. Each day, we have to decide how to present ourselves to the world. Will we wear kippot? Will we cover our heads or our hair in other ways? Will we wear identifiably Jewish jewelry? And so, I'll ask you again, how many times since October 7th have you stopped yourself leaving the house or leaving the synagogue to ask whether that is what you should be wearing on the street? The goals of priestly garments are the same ideals we consider, at least subconsciously, as we get dressed. Is it more important to show kavod to Hashem and display the tiferet of Judaism to others? Or should we focus on more practical needs to keep ourselves safe in a world rife with anti-Semitism? I don't pretend to know the answer, but what I do know is that we cannot underestimate the complexity of making this decision for each individual person. Now, don't get me wrong. I hate that we have to do a risk assessment before wearing identifiably Jewish garb in the United States in 2025. But we do. That's just the reality we live in. And the calculation looks a little different for everyone and can easily change from year to year, from month to month, or even from day to day. Just as we endeavor to understand why the priests in the Mishkan, in the temple, dressed the way they did, we can do the same for ourselves. Until I tracked my own outfits for my dress assessment last year, I didn't realize how much subconscious thought, exhausting subconscious thought, went into everything I chose to wear. In the Talmud, Rabban Gamliel institutes a rule. Only those whose outsides match their insides are allowed to enter the Beit Midrash, the house of study. Only those who present themselves to the world as they truly are worthy of learning Torah. What does it mean, Jewishly, for our outsides to match our insides? In my experience, it is all too easy in our communities to feel like a bad Jew for any number of reasons. But please, instead of feeling that way, if you choose not to display your Jewishness publicly, if you choose to prioritize safety, or even sometimes convenience, over wearing a kippah or a Star of David necklace, just ask yourself, why? Why are you wearing what you're wearing? Why are you not wearing what you have chosen to not wear? Why is that where the comfortable balance of kavod, tiferet, and practicality stands for you in this moment? You never know. You might be surprised by your own answer.